Anybody that doesn't think that gold did exceptionally well in this latest meltdown is not looking at the same data I am. Every other asset in the world went down by at least 25%, whereas gold, if you closed your eyes during the worst day or two, I don't think it went down by more than 3 or 4 or 5%. It's responded almost immediately. So I think gold looks great.
Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And wow, as we continue on into April, things are heating up in the gold and silver markets. As we sit here recording on Tuesday, gold up at 1740 almost. Silver rallying today as well, up 41 cents at $15.80. Wow, and liquidity warnings and announcements from the exchanges continue to emerge. So fascinating times in the markets, and today I'm quite excited to be joined by a friend of mine, who is James Anderson of Vangold Mining, and very experienced in the gold and silver markets. So James, a pleasure to welcome you on in here, first time on the show. And before we dig into the markets, how are you today, my friend?
Yeah, really good, Chris. Thanks very much. Everybody's locked down. I'm in Greater Vancouver in my home office, like everybody else. It could be a lot worse. The sun is shining. There's food in the cupboard and enough wine to keep me sober for many weeks to come.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, and that's one of the things I've enjoyed noticing how, yeah, it's different, but life is carrying on. I actually see people sitting outside in their front yard more, which is nice, and glad to hear you're doing all right up over there in Vancouver, and certainly excited to get your take on what's happening in these markets. We can start with gold, which I know you're quite in tune with. Here we can see gold at 1740, so up quite a bit today. And what's your thoughts on what's going on here?
Well, I guess, just to talk about gold for a minute, as always in these crisis moments, and I'm old enough now to have lived through a number of them. In these crisis moments, gold goes down too. The way that most speculators play gold is in the trading pits, and therefore there's implied leverage to those gold contracts. And when there are margin calls, you don't sell what you want, you sell what has a bid, and gold always has a bid. And this goes right back. I remember in 1987, I was a young man and just getting involved in the capital markets, and I called a friend of the family who was probably the best mining broker in Western Canada at the time. And because I was a friend of the family, he took my call and he said, James, how are you doing? I said, so George, like what's up with gold? Why would it go down when the whole market is cratering? And his answer was, well, when they raid the whorehouse, they take all the girls. And I've always loved that expression. And I think that that's exactly the case. Anybody that doesn't think that gold did exceptionally well in this latest meltdown is not looking at the same data I am. Every other asset in the world went down by at least 25%, whereas gold, if you closed your eyes during the worst day or two, I don't think it went down by more than 3 or 4 or 5%. It's responded almost immediately. So I think gold looks great.
Yeah, that's a great point you mentioned there, James. I know Warren Buffett is talking about how it's a useless relic, and there's a lot of statements out there. Yet, if you measure from 1971 gold versus the stock market, or even from 2000, gold is up. We were saying fivefold for a while. Now gold's up sevenfold from that $250 level. So I guess it depends on one's perspective. But like you said, it is interesting. Gold, it's high of the year today, despite everything that's happened with Corona.
Yeah, quite so. If you look at somebody like Warren Buffett, and there are other people like that who have no use for gold, and God bless them. I mean, Mr. Buffett is a genius. He's a multi-billion. Well, I think he may well on any given day be the wealthiest man on the planet. He's a genius. Maybe he doesn't need gold. For the rest of us mortals, we need gold. We need gold to protect our financial well-being. We need gold as a stabilizer for our financial assets. And maybe he doesn't need it. Maybe Bill Gates doesn't need it. I don't know. But the rest of us need gold.
Yeah, and like you said, certainly anyone who had that allocation in their portfolio over the past month or two is probably pretty fortunate and happy about that. I know before we started recording, you had some thoughts on the current gold to silver ratio, which the paper markets is high. We talked about how if you actually look at the physical metals, a little bit different, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, well, this is sort of a pet theory of mine, I guess, Chris, and I like this theory because it's mine, but I also like this theory because there's nobody else in that I've read that comments on it quite in the same way. And as you pointed out, in the physical market, maybe that silver to gold ratio is a little narrower, but right now in the paper markets, I see 110 to 1. And I've never seen that before certainly in my lifetime. I know that historically, you had numbers like 8 to 1 and 12 to 1 in antiquity. 16 to 1 was a number that held for centuries. And that the 16 to 1 ratio I find interesting because that is about what the ratio is of gold to silver in the Earth's crust. So I think that there's some natural science to that. And then throughout my lifetime, I think the average is about 60 to 1. Right. So now you've got a divergence here of about 2 times that. And I have to ask myself, okay, why that is. And my theory goes something like this. One of the things that because I'm always a believer that there's nothing new under the sun, that these financial rhythms have happened, in generations past. But one thing that is a little bit different today than in most times in history is the concentration of wealth that we have today. There's only a couple of times in recorded history, maybe you have to go back to the Roman Empire before you have a concentration of wealth the way that it exists today. So what you have are billionaires and people who maybe aren't billionaires, but who are very, very wealthy people, not nearly as much of a middle class as we're used to in North America. And then sort of the great mass of people underneath that. And because the concentration of wealth is so great, when those people get financial advice, and I'm sure that they get very good financial advice, I would think that some of their financial advisors would say to them, well, listen, you should go out and buy some precious metals. And the chap would say, well, that sounds like a reasonable idea. What should I do? And how much should I allocate to that? And, the answer might come back, well, you should allocate 50 million, 100 million, $200 million to precious metals. Well, you can't do that with silver. You can't do that with silver. You would, if you went into the silver contracts, you would warp the trading. If you went in and bought physical, you'd need a warehouse. You'd need a Boeing 747 size warehouse to store it, right? So they can't buy that. They can't buy platinum. Same deal, but even worse, right? You'd move platinum $150, right? How could you sell it? Impossible. So all of those very wealthy people, all of the billionaire class, when they're going in, when they see what's going on in the world financially and culturally, and they say, well, I'd like some exposure, I think, to precious metals. They only have one game, and that's gold. That's all that they can buy. And I think that's why, because for the rest of the great unwashed masses out there, there's not a huge drive to buy precious metals right now. There's a huge drive to pay off their credit cards. There's a huge drive to pay off student loan debt. There's a huge drive to liquidate debt if they can. But there isn't a huge drive. When that changes, I think that the silver can catch up to gold. At least the ratio can catch up to gold pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, that certainly makes sense. Geez, with the Fed not even being able to say how much they're going to print, just say unlimited, and God only knows what the real number is. It makes sense why we are seeing. And maybe if I just one twist on what you said, I don't think it's anymore that we're waiting for this point, whether today is the beginning of a much bigger move or not. I mean, it's happening now. These things with the Fed are happening now. One thing I'd love to touch on that we've heard reports about, and as I see in the background, here is Vangold's website, and mentions that you guys are in Mexico. Obviously, with the coronavirus, a lot of places shutting down non-essential services, and we heard a week or two ago, Mexican government, at least initially, said they were shutting down mining. I've seen it's gone back and forth a little bit, so maybe you could just touch on that, and then we can talk a little bit about the company.
Sure. Well, what we understand, and this is from the Mexican presidential decree on, I believe it was the 1st of April, and basically the decree shuts down all non-essential um, business. Okay, and so the comments on mining within the decree were small, because they're really talking about all business, shutting down all business, and doing the whole self-isolating, stay at home if you're non-essential sort of thing. With regards to mining, the comments were, if you are a non-essential mining operation, that you should shut your operation down in an orderly fashion. And so in Guanajuato, in the area that we are, Endeavor Silver mines and has a milling operation. We've got two mills in the area, really. Great Panther Silver, um, they have a mining and milling operation as well. And in both instances, we understand that those operations have been reduced and then sort of put on temporary care and maintenance, if you will. Um, that seems to be the way for mining in Mexico, and that's both exploration and mining. I think I've seen a number of examples of that. Of course, with all governments, they like to give you direction and then leave you a little bit of wiggle room. They don't really define what's essential or what isn't. So if you want to stay working, I guess maybe you can. There's a friend of mine who's also a shareholder of Vangold, who is a miner in Manitoba, Canada, and they mine at a famous mine in Flin Flon, Manitoba, called the 777 mine, which is a very high grade zinc mine. But what I didn't know was that it's so high grade that actually a lot of the zinc that they use is so pure that they use it for medical zinc, for the type of zinc that we have in vitamins, and for the sort of paste that you put on babies' bottoms to keep them nice and soft.
Yeah.
So that mine has been declared essential, and they're still operating. So a little bit of wiggle room. What exactly is essential? It's hard to define, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly, I can only imagine how those negotiations go, and is interesting how that can be arbitrary. Although I appreciate that update, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Vangold and some of the projects that you guys have going on. And we have an audience of people who are very into gold and silver, expecting quite a significant move. And actually, maybe in the same time, answering what we talked about before we hit the record button, of how you could have a big move in gold, but that doesn't mean every mining company is going to go up. So maybe some thoughts on how to pick some good ones, and some of the reasons why investors might be well suited to look into Vangold.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that opportunity, Chris. So, for your listeners who might not be familiar with Vangold, Vangold is a TSX venture company stock. It's been around a long time. It was originally listed about 30 years ago. Um, the bear market in gold and silver was not very kind to Vangold, and the company was kind of driven almost into non-existence. I took over as CEO about a year ago, And the reason why I was so interested in the company is because of this project in Mexico. I think it's a diamond in the rough. I think that there's lots of reasons to be very, very excited about it. So restructured the company a little bit, have financed it, and it's just back trading again on the venture exchange. The symbol is now VGLD, and it's only been trading for about 3 or 4 weeks, and it came back to trade right in the hurricane of the stock market collapse. So we think that there's an opportunity there. Some people selling stock when into a market where there's not a whole bunch of buyers. With regards to the project itself, it's in Guanajuato, Mexico. If your listeners aren't quite sure about where that is, it's right in the center of Mexico. If you throw a dart at Mexico and hit a bullseye, that's where Guanajuato is. As I mentioned, there's a lot of mining, Great Panther and Endeavor and Fresnillo, which is maybe is the largest primary silver producer in the world, a Mexican company. Its shares trade on the London Stock Exchange. They're all active in the area. But historically, there's been about 1.2 billion ounces of silver taken out of this area, taken out of this region, since the 1500s, when the Spanish first became interested in looking for precious metals in this area. So this particular project that we've got is called El Penguico. It's a past producer. It was a very high grade gold and silver mine about 100 years ago. You can see some of the images there from our website. It was a pretty big operation in its day. The company was actually listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 1906, and it operated up until 1913, when the Mexican Revolution started, and people were literally being shot in the street in the area. For whatever reason, this particular high grade mine has never come back into operating mode. As I say, it was a pretty big operation 100 years ago. It was mined on 10 levels using 4 different shafts. They had a big cyanide plant, as well as their own mill. You can see on the top picture there that's on the screen right now, the leftovers, some of the waste material that we think is pretty good grade right now, and we're going to try and monetize by sending some of this material to a local mill. Hopefully a test of that will be done within the next couple months, and we're still working out the details of that. So I encourage, I don't want to spend too much time concentrating on that today with you, but I encourage your audience, if they're silver and gold interested, have a look at Vangold's website. It's a good introduction to what we're trying to do, and to a fantastic mining area.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, James. And before we wrap up, we'll get the link and the phone number for that. Although, perhaps one last question. I guess we touched on a little bit, but for someone who might be new to, they see the reasons for gold and silver to rise, what are some things to think about, when they're looking and seeing a lot of different companies out there, from someone who's done that and who's been there? Any thoughts you can pass along, or tips of how to get started evaluating some of these projects?
Right. So, as you mentioned, you and I spoke about this just before you hit the record button on the interview today, and I do think that it's really important for investors in this space to contemplate and to think about. As I mentioned to you, I was in the brokerage business here in Vancouver for about 20 years prior to getting onto this side of the business, and I financed these kind of little exploration companies for a long time. And one of the things is that a lot of investors never really think about what the risks are. And with these junior companies, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things to it. But with these moving companies, I would suggest that the 2 biggest, most important things in an investment decision into one of these little companies is jurisdiction, right? If you actually find something, will the local government and the national government where you're at, will they allow you to keep it, or will it be nationalized? Is the government and the social license in place to actually bring the thing all the way to fruition and have it become a mine? You might not hang on to the investment that long, But unless there's that possibility of being able to move the company that far, the market will never embrace that story. And I can't. There's only about a half dozen different jurisdictions in the world today where I would be interested in spending shareholder money on exploration and development. Other than that, for the most part, the human population these days says, "Oh, mining. Oh, yeah, we're very interested in mine. Very, very supportive of mining." Oh, no, 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 not here. You can't do any mining here. You can mine somewhere else. So you need to find where that somewhere else is and make sure that your investment dollars are there. And the other thing that I would say is you have to have a look at the people involved and be comfortable that the board of directors and the advisors and the management of the team are working full time on this project. There's lots of people in our business that are working on 6 different projects. I assure you that's difficult. Um, and do they have a track record of success? And these are all long shots. So success doesn't necessarily mean that you've made an enormous discovery last time out. But have you been in the business long enough to have figured out some of the pitfalls, and you're generally trying to move this one project forward? If not, well, then your investment dollar is going to be challenged, even if the commodity that you're investing in does very, very well.
James, I think that's great insight. Matches really what I've learned in my time in the mining world. And perhaps just for folks who would like to follow up on that, get more information, you can let them know how to reach you.
Yeah, you can go online, vangoldmining.com. Symbol once again, VGLD. And for your American listeners, VGLDF like Foxtrot. That's the pink sheet quotation, but you'll be able to find the website there and send me an email, and I assure you I will get right back to you. Tout sweet.
Well, I sure appreciate that. And I can confirm it's been really nice communicating with you. You are responsive, something I like about a lot of these good companies out there, and gave me a great presentation of the company, which folks at home contact James and maybe he can set that up for you, because it was nice to see what you guys are doing. I appreciate you sharing your long body of experience and knowledge with me and our audience today, and we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Oh, that's very kind. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for your time, Chris. I look forward to doing this again soon as well.